Hello everyone. It's James again. And today is a follow-up from yesterday's video, where we talked about sleep paralysis, narcissistic abuse, and basically witchcraft. If you haven't watched the video, I will link it below. So if you would like, check it out. And then come on back to this video. Now today's video is to talk a bit about our family histories of narcissistic abuse. And yes, witchcraft. Why is this important? For one, you can finally realize the depth of what has been really happening in your family. And most importantly, that you are the link to finally break the family curse. You have gotten away, gone no contact, or very low contact from your narcissistic family of origin. You're doing the self-work. The self-work to become the best version of yourself. And one of the best ways to do that is understand where you come from. So you can make sure you are going in the correct direction. So you can have a positive and successful life. Now, whether or not you think you have strong witchcraft ties in your family, it's good to take a look at your family tree for narcissistic abuse. Usually we can do this by decoding stories we heard as a child about this relative or that relative. Now being learned on the subject, it becomes fairly easy to see who was the scapegoat and who was the narcissist doing the abusing. Then we come full circle to ourselves, realizing, wow, I can't believe I came from this generational toxic mess. And now I'm making a change. No more. It ends and stops right here. Right now. I'm going to do the self-work to deal with the CPTSD I'm dealing with as a result of my abuse. I'm going to work on my physical health as well. I'm going to work hard on my codependent and people-pleasing nature. I'm going to work on developing boundaries. Healthy boundaries. All the while still open to getting to know new people. All the while remaining careful. Not closed off but careful. You see, the narcissist's job is to make you doubt you were even abused. And sometimes even when we come across the best information regarding narcissistic abuse, we can and oftentimes do doubt ourselves. Did I really see what I believe I had seen? Was I really abused? However, when you're able to look at your family history for what it is, it removes all doubt. You come from a long line of narcissistic abusers and abuse victims. And being a victim stops right here. The cycle that has been going on for probably hundreds of years in your family has finally come to an end. Now, how does this tie into witchcraft? Now, first off, I want to say thank you to all of those that left comments on my last video, telling your stories with your brush with the occult or witchcraft. I think the more we talk about such controversial topics, the more people that thought they were alone will find their way out of the darkness they are currently in. Because they can relate. They can understand. They aren't the only ones out there living with such problems. So again, thank you. Now, one person pointed out, most people, if they look back far enough, have some sort of witchcraft in their families. Due to a lot of people that come from one country and another bringing over pagan rituals and beliefs. Also, to go a step further, if you were from an island of some kind, there might be magic by the way of voodoo in your family history. And you know, I do believe most people do have some sort of history with this, which still isn't good. But I think there are families these evil happenings stick with. And I do believe it goes hand in hand with narcissistic abuse. At least in many cases when looked at closely. First off, think about the narcissistic family members. Not even considering if they had occult ties or not. Think about their doublespeak and method of manipulation. It all seems like magic, doesn't it? Just by simple words or careful positioning, they are able to get people to do whatever they want. Just like a puppet. Again, it all seems like magic. Now, let me backtrack a moment and tell you more about my story, which ties in with my last video. I mentioned how there appears to be witchcraft or occult ties with my family. on how those ties appeared to be seeking me out, to trap me into that way of life. Now, with that being said, it wasn't like what it may seem like. There were never any witch ceremonies in my home. My mother, though a narcissist, was very, very religious. Religious in the way of going to church but not ever reading the Bible ever. But when I was little, she would have a few of her brothers and sisters come over to visit or play cards. And somewhere before the night's end, the topic of fortune telling seemed to more times than not to come up. Some would mention how they were going to visit this person or that person to help them communicate with dead people, or how they were planning on holding a séance in the future. All things at the time I didn't see or understand were things of witchcraft, and I didn't believe had any connection to the narcissistic abuse I lived through in that home. Then, as I mentioned, in my young teenage years, it appeared occult information and literature started to find its way into my path. Nope, not at my house. I never found those types of books in my house ever. Not saying they weren't there. I just never knew about any. However, if I were in a place with books, it seemed like there were occult books in the wrong section right in my eyesight, with something written on the cover promising happiness and to be the solution to all of your problems. How you can have anything you want. And though I, like my mother at the time, hadn't read the Bible, however, I did have a fear of God. And though I felt a draw to this material that always seemed to be in the most strangest of places and at the most strangest of times, I would have another pull telling me don't do it, that it's wrong. Now this is where I mentioned in my last video. I think when we talk about magic, Satanism and Hollywood, or those that found success there, I believe this is how it starts. They come from a crappy home, full of narcissistic abuse. They are looking for a way out. And before you know it, this stuff finds them. And they are given a choice. And those that have strong beliefs, they end up with sleep paralysis and other problems. But those that are willing to suspend or push aside those beliefs, they get what they want. And this stuff really works. It works with a hefty price attached to it. And because it works, that's what makes them take the next step and the next. But it usually starts with a young boy or young girl at the library with a book they just found that goes against their faith. But because their life is so horrible, they give in. Because all I wanted was the pain to end. I wanted to just escape it. Not knowing God was with me. He was with me the entire time. That being said, I quickly tossed out this stuff. Because deep down inside, without knowing any scriptures at the time, I knew it was wrong. And that's when the sleep paralysis started and went on for a long time. Now at that time, I still didn't know anything about narcissistic abuse. I didn't know about my family's past of witchcraft and such. But it seemed like my life would always take one bad turn after another. No matter how hard I tried. I know that was mainly because I was raised by a narcissist and wasn't given the proper love or skills to develop to my full potential. And the narcissist does this by design to make sure you have nothing but them to rely on. So they can abuse you and feed on your pain for a lifetime. But I kept pushing to live a normal life. And things kept going on. And like many of you have mentioned, I always used to feel like I was cursed. I remember when this online thing was new and was getting a bit more popular to search certain terms. I wasn't looking for abuse stuff. I was looking for, am I cursed? Then a few years later, I started to look for information on abusive relationships. Because of what I was going through with Susie. And through this process I realized the information I was finding out about narcissism and Susie applied to my family of origin and many fake friends I had growing up. But during this time, I started to really get closer to God. And started reading the Bible. And others' personal stories of abuse and witchcraft. I also see there is so much of this in our world that no one wants to admit. Yes, I do believe many people in high levels of power are Satanist. Yes, I do believe they use magic and hexes. And just because those on the low level never see it, many act like it's a joke. And the people that talk about such things are nuts. But I think back to my house and how I grew up. And there wasn't stuff everywhere. You see, there was a time in our society when those in Hollywood were very open about their occult and witchcraft dealings. Please do yourself a favor and look up on YouTube of old Hollywood stars talking about Satanism or witchcraft, or whatever other search term you can think of, and you will be shocked. The most popular actors and actress and singers of their day openly admitting they sought out spiritual answers from what appear to be witches and warlocks. How they talk to the dead. How they do this and that. Now if they did all of that, how much you want to bet? Spells were cast to get them what they wanted as well. Now it's not to say many of them weren't talented. Because many of them were. They were either really good looking or funny or could sing well. They had it all. But they had a background in witchcraft. Much like we hear about people such as Jennifer Lopez today. Now it's not to say I know what she is doing. Nor can I confirm any of the stories said about her. So I don't know if they are true or not. But what you hear about her was commonplace when Hollywood was in its golden age. Now it's not to say everyone was involved in this. Or are involved in this that sing, dance, or in the entertainment industry. Because I'm sure there are those that work their job they got in such a field, much like you work your job you go to every day. But much like you go to your job, and you might see the corruption or bad things that go on there. These Hollywood employees see the evil and corruption at their job. But like many of us, they say nothing because they have bills to pay. It's sad to say it that way. But that's what happens. They know who runs the show. And that somewhere along the line those in Hollywood I think understood it was a better idea to stop talking about witchcraft so openly and turn it into a secret. And if anyone dare speak on the subject they were ridiculed and marginalized. Now to move back to my story. When I started this journey I'm still on. During a conversation I had with my mother. Though I was limited contact, I would check on her from time to time. Because her Munchausen syndrome and inflicting illness on herself started to manifest into real health problems. But during this conversation, she went on about how she was mad at this doctor that so-called didn't know what they were doing. Because they wouldn't give her her pills. And then she said and did something interesting I had never heard her say or do before. She mentioned a dead relative I had never met. By saying, she was so mad at that doctor she wanted to give him the middle finger to his face. But then she put her hand in the devil horns. Not hang loose. Not I love you. But the devil horns. And she said, this dead relative would never give people the middle finger. She said that she would do this with her hand and point it at them. As she made the devil horns with her hand. All of this happened right when I started to become awake to narcissism, demonic attacks, reading the Bible, and learning about everything I could. And when she did this, all of what had happened in my past and what I was learning in the present hit me like a ton of bricks. I then said to myself, my God, this has been in my family for a long time. Not just narcissistic abuse, but witchcraft as well. My God. Now you have to know my mother. Yes, 99% of the time she is lying. But there's a 1% of the time she will blurt out the truth for no reason at all. Such as in this instance. It was weird and it was strange and she never mentioned it again. Then I found out some young distant relatives are actually living their lives full on as real witches. I haven't seen or spoke to them in many years. But I just shook my head and finally accepted. This is my family. And this is no accident. And then I remembered all of the times I would go here or there. And there was some sort of book or magazine with how to use magic. To get what you want in my eyesight for me to see and be attracted to. And though I didn't have these books in my house, I can't speak for other relatives in my family. We didn't have witch parties or anything like that. No strange books. No nothing. Just a lot of talk after cards were played or during visiting time. Then out of nowhere the stuff started to show up in my life. And strange admissions from my mother with the devil horns. And distant relatives younger than me that are confirmed witches. What the heck? But it made sense. So I say. Yes. No matter if you are from the islands, or from Europe or Africa, or Australia. I understand a family member back in the day probably was involved in something like this. But the question is it recurring like a horrible cycle? To the point you can see that it's a part of the fabric of your family. Even if it doesn't appear to be what Hollywood tells us about witchcraft. That being said, I want to again say thank you all for your comments previously. And your comments in the future. I'm curious to hear what you have to say on this topic. I will tell you this is something I've held inside for a long time. And have never told anyone before. Out of shame. It took a long time to convince myself God forgave me for even being tempted by such things. I would cry and cry about this part of my life. As it hurt me so bad. But I now know. God had forgiven me. Heck, He was the one that lifted the sleep paralysis from my life. But you know. I thought about it. I thought. Let me talk about it here. What if someone else had this as an experience and is having a hard time dealing with it? Please, like I've mentioned before, the more we tell our stories, the more we not only help ourselves, but others can identify and can start the journey we started. Because the evil people that did this mess to us, they want us to remain silent. And they want to continue abusing this person and that person over and over and over. And the only way they can do that is if the masses are uneducated about this type of stuff. And by sharing our stories, the masses are being educated. So again, thank you for participating. With that being said, let's keep praying for wisdom. Let's keep praying for strength. And let's keep praying for courage. And until next time, bye for now. And be good to yourself.